Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Gordon Singh, and today I will be presenting on the topic diversity beyond race and gender. So, the purpose of my oral presentation today is to examine how multiple forms of diversity influence team performance, innovation, and decision making. The objectives for today is to define and distinguish cognitive, epistemic, functional, and identity diversity, explain how inclusion, communication norms, and psychological safety influence whether diverse perspectives are shared and utilized in teams. We want to evaluate competing perspective on whether viewpoint diversity can substitute for racial or social diversity. In addition, we want to analyze how cognitive and epistemic diversity contributes to innovation and ambidextrous performance under specific organizational conditions. We want to synthesize an integrative framework which links diversity types, inclusion conditions, mechanism, and organizational outcomes. We want to identify a significant research gap and formulate a dissertation-worthy research question based on current literature. And finally, we want to assess the evidence regarding the condition under which diversity enhances team and organizational effectiveness. So guiding our presentation today is the following thesis statement. So research suggests that diversity produces positive outcomes, not simply because demographic differences exist, but because cognitive, epistemic, functional, and identity diversity interacts with inclusion processes that determine whether diverse perspectives are expressed, valued, and integrated into decisions. So let's begin by defining some terms. So today we were going to be looking on 4 types of diversity that exist: identity, functional, cognitive, and epistemic diversity. Now, these diversity, they differ in their focus. For example, identity diversity focuses on demographic characteristics, such as gender, race, age. Functional diversity focuses on expertise and roles, such as engineering, marketing, finance. Epistemic diversity really reflects differences in knowledge, experiences, and ways of understanding the world, while cognitive diversity refers to differences in how individuals think, process information, and solve problems. Now, together, these forms of diversity represent distinct but interconnected sources of variation that can influence team learning, the decision quality, and innovation when supported by inclusive environments. So let's look on when diversity becomes useful versus when diversity becomes ignored. Now, inclusion practices, communication norms, and psychological safety really determines whether diverse perspectives are expressed, valued, and incorporated into team decisions. Inclusive leadership practices really encourages participation from all team members, while communication norms that support respectful dialogue increases the likelihood that individuals will share unique information and challenge assumptions. Also important is psychological safety, because psychological safety further strengthens these processes by creating an environment in which employees feel comfortable speaking up without fear of embarrassment, punishment, or exclusion. So here are 2 supporting mechanisms that can explain how diversity influences team effectiveness. First, information elaboration occurs When team members exchange, discuss, and integrate diverse knowledge and perspective, leading to more comprehensive decision making and problem solving. Second, knowledge integration enables teams to combine different expertise and experiences into innovative solutions and improve performance outcomes. A high-stake example can be found in healthcare settings, where multidisciplinary teams often includes physicians, nurses, pharmacists, and specialists with different forms of expertise. When psychological safety and inclusion communication are present, team members are more likely to raise concerns, share critical information, and challenge potentially harmful decisions. Conversely, when employees fear speaking up, important information may be withheld, increasing the risk of medical errors and adverse patient outcomes, may even lead to death. So this example demonstrates that diversity alone is insufficient. Organizations must create conditions that allow diverse perspectives to influence decisions effectively. So, can viewpoint diversity substitute for racial or social diversity? There are actually two perspectives that exist on this matter. Perspective one. Perspective one is that viewpoint diversity can substitute for social diversity. So some scholars argue that the primary benefit of diversity comes from exposure to different ideas, perspectives, and ways of thinking rather than demographic characteristics. From this perspective, teams with substantial ideological or viewpoint diversity are more likely to challenge assumptions, avoid groupthink, and engage in critical analysis, leading to improved decision quality and innovation. Research suggests that exposure to competing viewpoints can enhance learning and problem solving, even when team members share similar demographic background. The second perspective is that viewpoint diversity cannot fully substitute for social diversity. Other researchers argue that racial and social diversity contributes unique forms of knowledge rooted in lived experiences, their social identities, and access to different information networks. So, identity based experiences often shape how individuals interpret problems, recognize risk, and generate solutions. So, consequently, demographic diversity can create epistemic and cognitive resources that viewpoint diversity alone cannot fully replicate. So let's evaluate. Evidence suggests that both perspective captures part of the picture. Viewpoint diversity can improve critical thinking and decision quality, but demographic diversity may introduce experiences and insights unavailable within socially homogeneous groups. So, a limitation is that current research studies often examine these forms of diversity separately rather than their interaction. But the strongest evidence supports a complementary rather than substitutional relationship. Current research indicates that organizations are more likely to benefit when viewpoint diversity, cultural diversity, and social diversity coexist within inclusive environments that encourage the engagement, the exchange, and interaction of diverse perspectives. So let's talk about innovation and ambidexterity. Cognitive and epistemic diversity are most likely to support innovation and ambidextrous performance when teams operate in environments that encourage open communication and the integration of diverse knowledge. Cognitive diversity contributes different ways of thinking and problem solving, while epistemic diversity provides varied knowledge, expertise, and experiences that can be combined to generate novel ideas and improve decision quality. These forms of diversity really help organizations to achieve ambidexterity, or the ability to simultaneously pursue innovation and operational efficiency. So, one important boundary condition is psychological safety. When team members feel safe to express dissenting views and share unique information, diverse perspectives are more likely to be exchanged and considered. So a key mechanism is knowledge integration and the process through which team combines different experiences, expertise, and viewpoints into coherent solutions. Psychological safety facilitates knowledge integration by encouraging participation and reducing the fear of criticism. As a result, teams are better able to leverage diversity to improve innovation and balance exploration and exploitation. So here's the key takeaway. Diversity contributes to innovation and ambidexterity, not simply because differences exist, but because psychological safety enables teams to integrate diverse knowledge into effective decisions and actions. So let's look on how we can integrate this diversity inclusion mechanism outcome into a comprehensive framework. Diversity inputs put the raw informational and experiential differences within teams. However, these inputs only translate into performance benefits when inclusion conditions are present. Psychological safety enables the members to speak up. Inclusive leadership ensures differences are valued and communication norms structure and equity participation. These conditions activate core mechanisms. Teams begin to elaborate information more deeply, integrate distributed knowledge, and engage in continuous learning. So together, these mechanisms produce high-order outcomes, including innovation, improved decision quality, stronger team performance, and ambidexterity, where teams can both explore new ideas and exploit existing capabilities. So let's talk about what the research gap is. So existing research has extensively examined psychological safety and cognitive diversity separately, but limited research examines how psychological safety influences the conversion of epistemic diversity into ambidextrous performance in high-stake teams. So the research question begs to be asked. How does psychological safety influence the relationship between epistemic diversity and ambidextrous performance in high relatable organizations? Why does this matter? It matters because we need to clarify how diversity really creates value. When we can clarify the role of diversity, then we can effectively and efficiently implement diversity within organization. It improves leadership practices. An inclusive leader opens the door to create an organizational culture that is prone to efficiency and good outcome. It advances diversity theory beyond demographic, and it addresses organizational performance concerns. So this is why it matters. So let us conclude. Let's revisit what we began with, our thesis statement. We can now say that diversity contributes to organizational effectiveness, not because demographic differences exist alone, but because multiple forms of diversity are translated into knowledge sharing and decision making through inclusive team processes. There are three takeaways from this presentation. One, diversity extends beyond demographic characteristics. Two, inclusion and psychological safety determines whether diverse perspectives are utilized. And three, innovation and ambidexterity emerges when teams effectively integrate diverse knowledge. So the research gap that was found is how psychological safety converts epistemic diversity into ambidextrous performances remains insufficiently understood. And our research questions that we are left with at the end of this engagement with the literature is, how does psychological safety influence the relationship between epistemic diversity and ambidextrous performance in high relatable organization? These are my references, and I thank you. Have a good day.